Testing, testing. Okay. Hey, welcome back to my channel. If you are new, I'm Stephanie David Kalawa-Enui. I am a mom, health coach, bodybuilder, and today's episode is about divorce. What? If you have not subscribed yet, or if any of these things feel interesting to you, please don't forget to subscribe. And so I don't waste your time, we have timestamps at the bottom of each one so that you know. Okay, so quick update. We are about 16 weeks out after tomorrow from the next bodybuilding competition. Baby's almost 9 months, so 9 months postpartum. Feeling really good about just the flow of my coach and food and working out. Energy is up. That's always great. So want to check in from that standpoint. I did an Instagram vote on whether the followers, you, wanted me to talk about 10 lessons I got from divorce, now that it's been about 10 years, or 10 lessons in body confidence after children. So that episode, Body Confidence, is next week. This one is all about big lessons from divorce. I've never really talked about this to this degree. So I'm going to give you a 2 to 3 minute kind of lump sum of marriage divorce stuff that happened at 27. I'm 39 now. And because all the lessons, the 10 big lessons that I gained from it, the context matters, right? So prior to my first husband, I had one boyfriend. I wasn't a big dater. I didn't know that I had pretty bad anxiety back in middle school, high school. There were people who asked me out, but even if I was very interested, it was a lot easier for me to just say no, because from an anxious mind, if you say no, you're kind of certain you know what the future is going to hold. If you say yes, 9 million questions instantly open up and flood the anxious mind of like, oh my gosh, what do I wear? What do I do? What does it mean? All these things. So I didn't date much. I had one boyfriend from middle school to high school. We didn't have the greatest relationship. He was a nice guy, not very interested in school, but gave me tons of freedom to do, I played 2 sports. There was a lot of freedom in the relationship, and I really appreciated that. Then fast forward, I met my first husband, my son's father, in college. And back then, if you asked me my definition of love, it was kind and nice. Growing up in LA, I witnessed a lot of different relationships that, not personally, but other relationships that were really toxic. There was a lot of violence, there was a lot of drugs, and I was like, I just wanted someone nice. And so I literally married the first nice guy I met. I mean, we dated for a really long time. And long story long, I got married in my early 20s. And we hadn't experienced enough adult things for me to really understand what I needed. My mom tried to warn me, like, hey, she tried to show me the red flags, but when you don't know what red flags look like, you don't even know what red flags mean. Even if the person's like, hey, this is a red flag, I wasn't able to grasp the magnitude of these red flags. But long story long, after probably 7 or 8 years of dating, under 2 years of being married, Leimana was under 2. He was probably a year and a half. It was very evident that as much as we were together for, almost a decade, who we wanted to be as adults were very, very not complementary. It was not going to be a happy home. We went through therapy, we went to counseling. The counselor even, in a really gentle way was like, you guys are very different people. And from there, I remember the therapist saying, like, you could start to imagine a different happily ever after. And I remember thinking, is the worst thing divorce? No, even to this day, the worst thing to me is not divorce. The worst thing for me is spending a significant amount of time with someone and hating them or hating yourself. And that happens whether or not you're married, whether you stay married, whether you break up. And I remember thinking clear as day, like, I have to start thinking about a different happily ever after. And At the time, nobody in my family was divorced. My family, my father's side, who I'm quite close to, my dad had 4 brothers. He was one of 8, 4 sisters, and everybody was married. And I instantly went to shame. I just felt like I was such a failure. And now I'm going to get into my top 10 lessons. And these lessons span for the next 10 years, right? There are some really, really potent lessons that came very, very early. So 1, I made a never again list. The never again list was a list of things, not necessarily of never again, I don't want this in a partner, but never again will I be in a position that, divorce, you don't even know when you're in a relationship, everything's 50% off. There are things that you don't know and you take for granted in a unit. And so, it was never again am I going to beg someone to not drink and drive because it's normal in Hawaii. Never again am I going to justify how much or how little drinking and drugs are going to be around my children because nothing bad happened. There was a lot of never agains, and for a long time I was so mad that I had never again list. Never again am I not going to have enough money to take my child and myself and move away. I was so mad that I had a never again list, but later down the line, the wise person in me is like, your never again list is your list of standards and boundaries. I didn't have that prior to. And I wasn't a mess. I just had a very small understanding of what the world could be and expectations for people, but most specifically expectations for myself and my partner. So number 1, I definitely recommend if you're going through a divorce or a really hard breakup, you should make a never again list, because it around this time, what your needs, when they're so not met, it's very clear on what you need fundamentally. At least that's what happened to me. Number 2, divorce is awful. I mean, especially when you have a child, especially when you're far away, especially when you're not financially set to just go and break free. At the time, Dad had just died. I was depressed. I was in debt. There was just so many moving pieces. It felt so chaotic. It felt like I failed on all points. And one thing that made me feel a lot better was reading that chaos. The nature of chaos is that it can never last. I knew it had to end, the spinning. And so that's really important. You need to hear that if you're going through a really hard storm, the lessons are good. Don't forget about the lessons, but no, it's never going to last. It can't. Like, the nature of chaos is that it spins hard. Lessons are potent, and then you survive that storm. You realize, you are the calm of the storm. It sounds really cheesy. At some point, I had to get really gritty between debt, depression, and I was like, no, fuck this. I'm not the calm of the storm. I am the storm. Depends on your self-talk. But yes, chaos it's not going to last, no matter how crazy it is. Number 3, the breakup is just not with your partner, right? It was really clear at some point to me that I wasn't her for him. I wasn't going to be the one to grow old with and let him thrive and be the man he wanted to be, and vice versa. I could live with that because I lived with him and I saw it, and I can look you in the eye and say, hey, I gave it 110 for as long as I could, and it was not getting better. What I was not prepared for was the breakup of the identity of his wife. I really loved being his wife. I really loved being somebody's wife. I took great pride in, and I still do, that idea of being the kind of person that was meant to love someone forever. That was hard. It took me a long time to be okay with that identity, the disappointment of that identity. The second breakup was the breakup with his family and friends. Even if we had an amicable divorce, some people feel like there has to be a side. Like the idea of a happy divorce is not very common. We weren't happy, but we didn't hate each other. And granted, we didn't cheat on one another. We weren't replaced by another person. We really were just growing in very different directions. And so breaking up with his family and not being as close to them, and his family wouldn't like invite me to Christmas and dinners, and I still spend some time with them. But I stopped going to the weekly dinners and every holiday because as close as I was to his family, my relationship with him isn't getting any better. So the other part, number 4, is divorce really forces you to redefine, or if you don't already have definitions of your like pillar foundational words. What do I mean by that? I knew in my 20s I had very good friends with strong personalities where I was like, hey, describe your ideal relationship or your standards for love, or and I'm looking at my notes right now, boundaries. I had very strong friends that were like boom, 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 boom. And I knew that I didn't. And they're still working definitions, but I have a better, clearer definition of what I understand as romantic love and relationships. I'm going to write down the words that really like divorce was like made me ask myself, hey, what's your definition of love? In short, you don't have to chase anything that stands right by your side. What's your definition of relationships? Like someone right now, it's someone that's good to me and for me and is able and willing to be that and grow individually and simultaneously. What's my definition of grace, kindness, boundaries, finances, freedom, control? Those were these big words. Like I admit there was a time when things got so turbulent in the marriage that like I was like, well, maybe I should it's related to my self-worth. Maybe if I cleaned the house more, maybe if we went on more trips, maybe if I was smaller, maybe if I was bigger, maybe if I was more fun. There was this like really toxic formula. If I was this, then he'd be this. Terrible. And so I'm just being really honest that I'm grateful that I learned those hard lessons, and unfortunately through trial and error. But it's going to ask you about your big definitions of these like core value words. Okay, 5. Moving forward into dating, and that's a whole nother video, like dating after divorce. I learned that romantic relationships for me, especially, right, I have a son. How do I move forward? The only thing that made it manageable was to first see dating first like a day-to-day pass, like a gym pass. I don't know, fitness, right? Like, oh, I'm just going to buy a gym pass. I'm not going to commit to a membership. It's just day-to-day. And then after the day-to-day pass, it became like, okay, month to month. Like I'm graduating from like day-to-day, month to month. And then after month to month, the next step was like a Costco membership, like year to year. And then after Paco and I hit a year, the larger, heavier concept was like the presidential candidacy. Like every 4 years, we are renegotiating terms. And I still think that way. Like this is our first or second year being married, but I still have to think about how do I wrap my head around forever when I don't, you know what I mean? Like that's such a big word. And so the step back to that is how do I continue to choose, weekly, daily, monthly, yearly. And so these are the terms. It's like day to day, month to month, gym, right? Costco, presidential election. And that's like number 5, like relationships are like a different type of membership. It's been so helpful to me because sometimes there's so much pressure to figure it out. Like there's so much figuring it out. And little addendum to number 5, I would say like, I don't plan my life beyond like either 6 months or to 1 year. There is this pressure because you feel so lost, like your foundation is rocked to its core. And so I tell all my girlfriends, especially like in a breakup or divorce with kids, it's like, no, you are allowed to think 1 year. That's about it. for you and your child. That's as long as you need to think. So, number 6. Eventually, as the dust settles, you realize you're only, like, you may have divorced the person, but you're married to yourself. And it made me really think about, like, me. Like, at that time when I got divorced, I had a career. I was very happy about my career. I had no understanding of self-care. I didn't know how to take care of myself. I had failed at money because I was in debt. I had failed at love. And so that's really, like, the spark of the health coaching career was like, at the bare minimum, I'm married to having to feed myself. I'm married to having to understand money. I'm married to the words and the thoughts that I can control for myself. That's it. That's absolutely it. It's a harsh reality, but being, like, the fact that I failed at marriage, but I was married to myself, pivoted my actions completely. Number 7. Happiness is for everyone, and that's so cheesy. I will admit that there was so many times during the divorce process that, like, you know, I worked 5 jobs. 5? Yes, I worked 5 jobs. I was a teacher full-time, a server full-time, and then I tutored, I made jewelry, and I meal prepped for people. And I remember, and I was like, I'm not going to stay in debt. Like, I'm going to be divorced. I can't control that. I can control how much money I make. Anyways, happiness is for everyone is in reference to, like, there was a point where I was so ashamed that I was divorced that I never accepted a compliment. Like, I had to punish myself for getting divorced, even though, like, divorce is not a singular act. Like, now that I look back at it, like, I wish, you know, and the universe kept showing up for me. I kept getting really supportive people. But if I would say, if you're getting through divorce, like, you don't have to punish yourself any more than it sucks. Especially if you can look yourself in the eye and say, no, like, you gave it 110. Like, there was no hope. It was not getting better. It was not going to be a great, happy, even decent situation for you or your child. So that's number 7. Like, you deserve to be happy, and not after 10 years later. You don't deserve to be happy after you, whatever, you know, like, heavy. But 8, forgiveness. I enter this topic really lightly because, like, right, the marriage is over, divorce happened, but for my particular situation, co-parenting exists, and that's ever evolving. The therapist actually, like, made me make a list of all the marriage issues and all the parenting issues, and then he, like, ripped it up and was like, well, the marriage is over, and then he, like, threw away the marriage section and held the co-parenting section and was like, this is the only thing you have to worry about. Absolutely brutal. But it took me a long time to really sort, you know, am I forgiving me? Am I forgiving him? What do I not want to carry over to my next relationship? Why am I mad at things about myself that I didn't even know? Like, can I or do I, or how do I forgive him? But mostly, how do I forgive me for not knowing, for not seeing? Heavy, but forgiveness is for everyone. Happiness is for everyone. Forgiveness is for everyone, including you. Okay, that's 8. 2 more. If you have kids, this one's relevant for you, which is, like, you're blended, your family's blended but not broken. For a long time, I really thought that I was broken. I was like, something's wrong with me. I never said that I was not lovable, but I definitely was like, I'm okay, more than okay, being alone. There is that part of you where you're like, no one's gonna love you. Like, you're just done. Whatever done means, right? Like, you missed it. Whatever it is, you missed the boat. You're off the market. And a lot of it is, like, it's just because, like, it's such a mess. Like, undoing a family is such a mess. And the crazy part is, like, you know, when you have a kid, you're like, oh, my family's blended. It's not broken. That made me feel better. But I don't know the phrase of, you know, the equivalent of, like, if you don't have a kid, like, I also think, like, divorce breaks you, but it's not that like you're not broken into pieces. Like, in fact, I think it's actually a little bit of a blessing, where it's like if you don't know your boundaries and your standards and what truly makes you happy, divorce breaks you. And you're like left with all these pieces on the floor, and you're like, oh shit, like that's what I need, and that's what I need. And yeah, oh, that's like, yeah, you know, like for me, like right now, like my marriage, my second marriage to Paco, like I naively didn't know that like integral and vital to my definition of love was safety and fun. Like, Paco is nice, for sure. He's a kind man. But like, there was times in my first marriage where like I genuinely felt unsafe. Like, and I didn't know how to unfeel that. And I didn't know how to love beyond that. And I didn't know that my definition of love included safety. And then the other part was like, I didn't know that love, you had to make love fun. Like, I just thought love was fun. It sounds stupid, it sounds silly, but that's the truth. Like being married to him is like really, really fun. So that's number 9. Here's I have like number 10 and then a little tip. So my last one is, it's really, really important in the beginning of your divorce and throughout the divorce to have a counsel of wise people. And I mean that by, like, before I even got divorced, I asked my mom, like, are you going to hate me? I don't know why it mattered to me, but I'm like, it really mattered to me. I'm like, Mom, are you going to hate me if I get divorced? She's like, no. She's like, it's your life. Again, if you can look at me and tell me you tried and it's not going to be a safe, happy home for you and my grandchild, no, you shouldn't stay in it. Like, that meant a lot to me. And I remember even asking my ex-husband, are you going to hate me? Like, I didn't say, are you going to hate me if we get divorced? At the time, I said, are you going to hate me if we get divorced and I move away? And he said, no. And that really mattered. Like, their thoughts really mattered. And it's, you know, both of them is like, no, I'm not going to hate you. And so I can't tell you what I would do if they said yes, truthfully. But it's really important that you're honest with yourself of what really bothers you. And then second to my mom and my ex-husband is like talking to different people who have gone through divorce, you know, in your, like, you find like it's similar, right? I found people who were raising children or were raised in blended families back and forth, and I needed to hear like their kids were okay. I needed to know that my son was going to get a different definition of love and he was still going to be okay, because I just didn't know. And I remember talking to God about this. I'm like, okay, like, I think you're trying to teach me a different definition of love. Like, okay, like that was the lesson that I was getting from it. But it's helpful to have a counsel of wise people who are like, no, like, you're on the right track. You're doing great. Or like, this is hard and you're doing well. Just because like, it's, you know, it's so scary. And so the last thing, I know this is 11, but the, you know, the number 9, blended but not broken, it really pertains to people with children. The last one that I learned is that you get, like, if you're divorced, you don't have to, but you get to fall in love again. Like with so much more intention and so much more wisdom. And I hope you include yourself. It sounds so cheesy, but like, no, I didn't know myself when I got married the first time. I knew I wanted to be someone's wife. I knew I wanted to love someone forever. But if you asked me what my boundaries were, what, you know, how much money I wanted to make, if I could project money, how I felt about myself, if I had a vision for myself outside of someone's wife, I didn't. And so, you know, if you are divorced or you're getting divorced and it's such a mess, know that that messiness isn't going to last. Especially if you do the work within yourself to think, oh, how did I cause this messiness? What do I have power over so that this messiness doesn't return or it looks a different way, right? So I hope I shared things that are relevant to you. Please drop any messages down below. Next week, obviously, will be the body image one, but I appreciate you guys listening, and I hope to see you soon, next Thursday.